In this demonstration, we'll take a look at how to enable SSH to allow secure remote management of a Juniper device. So I've already connected to my router, so I'm connected to New York R1 as a router. The first thing I want to do to enable SSH is type in the edit command to go into configuration mode. Now, SSH is one of the protocols that could be used to remotely access and manage your Juniper device, but it's not the only method. We can also use Telnet, which doesn't encrypt the communication, whereas SSH does. So definitely SSH is the more preferred method of performing remote management. We also have web management capabilities as well, which you can use to remotely manage the device. And from a security point of view, you want to use HTTPS instead of HTTP. So we've decided to use SSH just because it encrypts the communication. So to configure SSH, we use the set system services command, and then we enable the protocol SSH. Now, there are a number of other options that we can configure here. A few that I want to configure is I'm going to use set system services SSH again. If I use the space and a question mark, you can get a list of parameters. And the first parameter that I want to specify here is whether or not we allow root login through SSH. And I do want to allow root login, so I'll put in the allow option. The other setting that I want to set here is the version of SSH that I want to support. So I'm going to do set system services SSH, and there is a protocol version parameter where you can specify that you want to use version 1, you want to use version 2 of the protocol, or you can actually use both by specifying them in square brackets. And the order is important here. This is the order that it'll try to make those connections. So I'll hit enter on that, and then I'm going to use my show system services to view the configuration. So we can see that SSH has been configured, root login is allowed, and the version of SSH that's supported is both version 1 and version 2. So now what I want to do is I want to go to an SSH client and try to make a connection to that server. Actually, first let me commit the change. So now what I want to do is I want to go to an SSH client and try the connection to the server. So I've launched my SSH program. I'm using PuTTY here as my remote connection software. So I've launched it. The first thing we want to do is specify the IP address of the device that we want to remotely connect to. So I type in the IP address of 11.0.0.1. Now you'll notice here that the port is 22, which is the port that's used by SSH. And so SSH is selected here as my connection type. If I was connecting through the serial port of the system, like maybe if I was going to console into the device, then I'd use serial port, or there's Telnet as well. Now notice when I choose Telnet, it switches the port number. So Telnet runs over port 23 and SSH over port 22. Now the other thing that I want to do here is I'm going to come down here to my connection parameters and go to SSH, and I am going to enable on the client version 1 of SSH. So let me open that connection. So once I try to open the connection, I do get a message that pops up. The first cipher supported by the server is single des, which is below the configured warning threshold. Do you want to continue? Yes, I do. So I am going to continue. And you can see here I get a login prompt. So I'm going to type in my username of root with my password. Now, once you've connected through SSH to the device, you'll notice that I'm actually within the kind of the Linux shell environment. So I got to type CLI to go into the command line interface of that device. And at this point, I can type in my edit command to go into configuration mode and start making changes on the device itself. So in this demonstration, you saw how to enable SSH on a Juniper device and then remotely connect to that device using SSH or an SSH client like PuTTY.